I'm Joyce Mishaan, and today we have Brett Holcomb here to talk about filmmaking, finance, funding your projects, and how to create a sustainable career in this industry, in the TV and film industry, without going broke. This is Brett Holcomb.
Hello.
Hi, you're here on my very, very first podcast ever.
Privilege.
I'm going to pull it up on my phone so that I say this right.
Go for it.
I'm still getting the hang of this.
Let's get it.
Okay. So Brett Holcomb is a 30-year entrepreneur with experience in retail and real estate and business acquisitions. And he currently specializes in acquiring small to mid-sized businesses. And his focus is on helping others build predictable, sustainable, and transferable cash flow to create generational wealth.
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Amazing. And the reason I wanted to have a conversation with you today is because I'm in the film and TV industry, right? I've been a TV producer for many, many years. And now I primarily focus on independent film, and I coach other filmmakers and I help them to get their films made or to grow their careers. And this question about money comes up again and again and again. And there's two ways that the question comes up. And so I want us to kind of dive in, really I have so many questions from your expertise as a business person, as an entrepreneur, and with this idea of building generational wealth for how filmmakers and creative professionals can better equip themselves to have sustainable cash flow and careers in this current moment.
Let's go for it. I'm
Awesome.
all ears.
Okay, good. All right. So the two questions that come up the most, one is about funding for projects, right? So that's how do I get my indie film funded? And when I think about that, it's very much about how do we make it appealing for somebody to put money into a film? And the other question that's coming up more and more, especially as the film and TV industry is changing, and right now we're in a moment where the labor market is really oversaturated and the opportunities are shrinking because things are changing in the way we consume content, and the AI is taking over a lot of these roles. And so we're feeling a real contraction in the industry. And so for these professionals, right, how can we get outside of our employee way of thinking about working and think like entrepreneurs?
Oof. Wow. That's a lot. That's loaded. So let's break them down independently, right?
Okay.
First, you were talking about funding. So, I come from a world, and it's funny, I have this conversation quite often, and a lot of people get two terms misconstrued. There's the VC, right? Your venture capitalist, and there's your private equity. One is looking for new ventures, right? Typically in the tech space, what have you. But the point is they're looking for something new that they would invest money into, where the other one is looking for something that's already been around and they're looking at bottom line and previous performance and things of that nature. So when people come into film and they're looking as independent, they're going to go obviously towards the first one, right? They're looking for new money. The biggest problem is the value that they don't focus on creating. That's what I find the number one, and that's across the board, but let's be specific to filmmakers, right? If I'm looking at a film, most people are looking to say, if I put $1 into this, I want $20 back, right? Because of the risk. And I think that a lot of times, I think you mentioned a stat about 3.4% of films actually are profitable.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So what happens to the others, right? And that's the risk. So the question becomes, if I am an investor, how do I mitigate my risk? How do I know, A, this film is going to work, right? But B, do I pour into more films or what have you? Or do I just go with that one singular film, but betting on it, believing that it is the film?
Yeah.
Right? That's going to work.
Absolutely. And actually, as I've gotten more in the indie space, I've heard producers who have been doing this for a long time say that one film is a hobby and multiple films is a business.
There you go. And that's the whole concept. So you go back now to this VC thing. We can land the plane here, right? typically VCs are going to invest in 10 things with the expectation that one is going to supersede the other 9, right? So if I'm looking for an investor, number one, I'm looking for someone who doesn't have a scarcity about them.
Mm-hmm.
So, going deeper into the investor mindset, you don't want just any investor, because a lot of times, in my experience, what I find is that when I'm finding someone that is maybe new to the investing space, they're going to be very clingy to that money.
Mm-hmm.
They're very risk adverse in the beginning because they don't understand the rules of engagement, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas someone a little bit more seasoned is thinking a little broader about the thing and says, okay, if yours doesn't work, I believe in it. I hope it works. It should work. But if it doesn't, I'm okay with it, right? That is a big difference in the mindset of looking for investors specifically.
And why would anybody, just to help us understand that way of thinking, be okay with losing their money?
Because there's these films that come out that are major home runs. And what you're looking at is just natural numbers, right? And you're just saying that, hey, again, I go back to that ratio of if one film hits and 9 do not, that one film pays for the other 9. So I'm looking at my overall return, not the return per film, but the return on my investment overall.
Got it.
And so that's so if I put $1 million out and I put it in 100,000 each film, and one film makes me back $3 million, the other ones I lose all my money in, I still made a 300% return.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible because I think that we get so kind of like tunnel vision about this is my one film and this is the budget. And the truth is, I think a lot of these professionals either could have multiple slates of films or could partner up to have those kinds of pitches or have producers that will take on a slate of films. But even just understanding that thinking, so even if that venture capitalist is investing over here and over there in these different projects, that there's still that kind of hedging that they're doing that would make them incentivized to actually invest in the film.
Absolutely. If you think about it, what if 2 hit out of the 10, right? It's typically 1 out of 10. What if 2 hit? They're going to be very careful in who they put money into, because obviously you want a 10 out of 10 if you can.
Right.
But the realization is, you have to understand from a language, and this is what I would tell potential filmmakers is, and I think you do a great job of doing this yourself. You break down a step-by-step process and how they should present themselves to an investor. And I think it's important for people like you to help out a lot of these up-and-coming filmmakers, because unfortunately, they think about the art, right, more than the ROI.
100%.
And you don't want to get lost in, because guess what? The world around them is thinking about the ROI. They love the art. It may draw them into it, but it's the ROI that really matters, unless it's a grant or something along those lines.
Right. And so let's say I was coming to you and I have a feature film and something I'm really passionate about, I've been working on for a long time. For example, my feature was about a soul singer named Lee Fields, right? It's a documentary. It took us 10 years to make. Let's say I come to you and I say, I have this documentary. It's about a soul singer. He's in his mid-70s and his career is on the rise after 50 years of trying. And we need $300K to make this movie. As an investor, right, if I'm pitching that to you, what do you want to hear, or what's going to make you say yes versus make you say, sorry, that's not for me?
So I think, first of all, if I'm going to assess it, because I'm a hard buck to get out of, just because, again, I look for predictable, sustainable cash flow, right? But I might have that 10%. Let's say I got $3 million and I got 300,000. And I'm saying, you know what? I'll put this in a project. If I hit a home run, great. If I don't, oh well, I'll manage with my other 90%. And that's how investors think. So for me, it's just, I would listen a little deeper to, how do I feel your movie is going to impact an audience that's important to me? So you should be very specific to your investor, right? Like, so what you mentioned just now resonated a little bit with me, but I'm like, I would want to hear more about it. But if it really resonates with me, I believe it might resonate with others. And for me, that's number one. So now first I'm going off your art, right? Then we'll go into the specifics. Well, how do you plan on doing this? How do you make money from this thing? You know, because I'm going to ask that, right?
100%.
But my first thing is, and I think most people is you will pull most investors in with your storyline and how they feel it will transfer out to that end audience, and how big is that audience to consider how much money it actually brings in. So we start art, we go money.
Right.
That would be my answer. Start art. If you can get me on the art, then let's go money and ROI.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And I think for filmmakers, a lot of the time, they've got the art, right? They totally get it, and they're storytellers, so they know how to craft a good hook that emotionally draws you in and helps you to feel like, okay, this resonates with me. It's going to resonate with somebody else.
Yep.
But sometimes we get tripped up on the remembering that films are a business and that they, one way or another, they're supposed to make money and bring in that revenue. So it's helpful to hear that, right? That we have to step into that
And
mindset.
I'll add one more thing to that. Just to clarify it more, there's this concept of target market, serviceable, addressable market, and total addressable market. These are like grad school terms, right?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Essentially what it means is like, what is your tight target? What is your target audience? Then what is your second tier? So think about a concentric circle, and it's a bullseye. And you're saying, okay, if I hit the bullseye, this is my target market. How big is that market? If you can define that as a filmmaker, say, hey, I think that 300,000 people would like this. I don't know what your numbers are. But I think if we do it right, we mark it out, we'll hit the next tier, which might be 3 million people, right? So think about it. So mathematically, I can add that up. I start thinking about that, and I'm like, okay, these numbers make sense. You only need 300,000 to potentially get a $50 million film, right? Minus your expenses and all that.
Right.
So I'm thinking a little differently about it. If you can crystallize that for me and kind of show me that you understand the audience that you should be reaching out to, that would really resonate with me, and that would push the envelope a little further.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, also because as you say that, I'm like, right, so views in one model or another equals dollars, right? The number of people that are going to consume it are going to pay some amount of money to do that. And so then it's about how do I make sure that I, one, know who those people are, and two, that I reach them so that I can get that kind of exposure to actually get them to see the film.
Yep, that's wonderful. And you think about it realistically, you never know, right? But you have to be a great salesperson to make me believe that you do know. And you have to be a great visionary to be able to explain it to me where I see it the same way you see it. And that's a buy-in. I buy into you more. Because at the end of the day, it really formulates to being about you.
Yeah.
Right? And if you and I connect, that gets me closer. You get that halo effect with me. And sometimes I start thinking a little bit less rational, and I'm willing to pay more. Well, no, I'm just telling you, like, that's human nature, right? If I like you, I turn off those signals a little bit, so I'm not so rigid in my approach. So it's very important that you know enough to resonate with me, because what people have to understand with investors is they're very rational. Right. So if you can pull them away from that rationale, especially something artistic, that changes the scope of things. So, but that's typically me drawing into you more so than even a project itself.
Right. And in a way, I have to understand you in order to be able to connect with you and resonate with you.
Yep. And you have to get me to understand you and like you. That's the real key point, is that do I like you enough to turn off some of this blindness? Because it really logically doesn't make sense. It's really lottery, right?
Yeah, it really
at the end
is.
of the day.
Yeah.
But will I bet on you more so than I bet on the next person? And how do you do that as the filmmaker?
Right. Okay, interesting. That's so helpful to know. And it helps to really position the filmmaker to go deep in understanding who they're talking to when they're pitching an investor and get inside their heart a little bit of like, what does this person actually care about? What are they inspired by? What are they moved by?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, most people are compelled by a great story, right? And so whether that story is the film itself or the person producing that film, do you have a great story? Are you compelling, right? And then if you're compelling, now I'll listen to, well, how did you go about that? And if I'm really invested in how you went about, this is how I shot this angle. This is why I'm thinking of doing this, and I'm invested in that, I lean in a lot more.
Yeah.
So just think about it from the tiers of you transferring to the film and that story being congruent and me wanting to be a part of that story.
Yeah.
That's really it. I have to have buy-in into your story.
Incredible. So helpful. Okay, so the next question that I want to ask is more focused on that. When we think about sustaining a career like this, right? So let's say I want to make films. That's the thing that I want to do for my career. We all know that that is not necessarily a path to generational wealth in and of itself. So how can I expand my mind as a creative professional? You know, the ways that I did this in my career in the past were that I worked on TV shows that were big shows, right? And I was getting hired project to project to work on these shows, but it wasn't really my art. It wasn't my work. I love the craft. I love the people that I got to work with, but there was still this part of me that was like, I want to do my thing. I want to tell my stories.
Right.
So that solution didn't quite work, right? In terms of building a sustainable career. So how can we get outside of what feels like an impossible situation of wanting to make art, wanting to make things that we're passionate about, and needing sustainable income and cash flow?
That's a great question. I'm going to turn it back to you a little bit and go back to it. Did it really not work? Like, I want you to think about that, right? So many of the people I believe you serve are in the middle of their careers, are definitely ascending in their careers. And you have to be careful because what happens, right? You get too deep into it, you get comfortable, and you never really go after what you want to go after when it's all said and done. No, it's not your art, but sometimes that association and being a part of something and the prominence that it brings you is enough to kind of suck you into staying, right? So the magic question becomes, well, under what conditions do you really go after what you want to go after, right? So I'm going to throw that back to you. I think this is a great time in this process that we talk about this. What made you say, you know what, I've worked at these wonderful productions, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to self-fund my own film and I'm going to go after it myself. What was the turning point for you to actually do that?
That's such a good question.
I'm Mr. Interview now.
Oh, no, I feel on the spot. Yeah, I think for me, a couple of things happened. One is that I had no idea what I was signing up for when I jumped into making an independent film.
Welcome to entrepreneurship.
Right? And now,
if we all knew what we were jumping into, I guarantee you 90% of people would not have been doing what they tried to do. So
100%.
That's number one. Go on.
Yeah. Right. So it was like a little bit like, okay, cool. Let's just try this. And then we had really connected with the subject with Lee Fields in a way that we felt a real responsibility to him to do what we said we were going to do and make a film about him. And my partner, Jessamine Ansari, is one of my best friends. And so I felt a real responsibility to her to stick with it through every challenge that came in making that movie. And it took us 10 years to make that movie.
Wow.
And we didn't know, like we didn't understand what we were just talking about how to get in the mind of people who might fund the movie.
All right. So you're telling me you made your own film. It took you 10 years, which is important for context. But you also started your own business. So tell me about that. Like, tell me that 10 years, what was happening in your mind? How did you do it step by step?
Yeah. It was not, first of all, it was not intentional. I thought like, okay, I'm doing this reality TV thing. I was working on pretty big name reality TV shows. I worked on Chopped for the Food Network. I worked on 90 Day Fiance, Chow House for the Food Network. And I was really working my way up, from as a production assistant on Making the Band. It was my very first job in TV.
Mm-hmm. Did you get cheesecake?
I did not.
Okay, go ahead.
I did not know what was going on.
All right.
But and I worked my way up through every position all the way to executive producer. And I was making a living, and I was driven by the fact that I was making a living. It was like, okay, this is close enough to what's creatively fulfilling to me, and it's paying my rent, and it's allowing me to have a certain lifestyle. And so I was going along with that. What I didn't realize was that I was building a tremendous amount of skill in producing at a pretty high level that then I could leverage to do what I want.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until I started doing it.
Yeah.
Until I said, okay, I'm going to make my own film. And I didn't know what that was going to be like. I just kind of dove into that. And had to pull from that experience and those relationships and everything in order to get that film made. And then the same is true with my business. Once I started coaching other filmmakers, I started to realize that I had a tremendous amount of experience that I thought I could only use in this one way.
Right.
But actually, I could use it in this completely different way that allows me financial freedom and kind of unlimited growth in terms of what I could do with the business, and also like control over whatever is going on in the industry, that I could find a way to serve people and have that be valuable to them.
Okay. So let's talk about this one word you use, because this is important, and this is the lesson. This is what I would tell you, but you mentioned it. You mentioned the word leverage. And I think that for your audience listening who are eager to get into this, and you said some critical things. You said you used your experience. You realized that you had a ton of highly, specialized experience that could transfer well, right? That was leverage within itself. But let's define that a little bit. Let's talk about how you took that leverage and how it transfers. So I have this thing called law. Right. And so it's an acronym for leverage. It's a formula, actually. It's leverage divided by arbitrage equals wealth. Right.
Can you explain for the audience what arbitrage is?
So leverage obviously is you're taking a little bit of something and you get a lot of return from it. You're using leverage, right? You want to buy a house, you use 90% of the bank's money and 10% of your own.
Right.
Right. If I'm an investor and I bought that house for cash flow, then the arbitrage would be the difference in what I made for my efforts. So in other words, I bought a house, it makes $2,000 a month. I pay the bank back $1,500. The $500 is the arbitrage. Right?
Okay.
So the more of that we can do, that equals wealth. If we can get that number big enough, then the money we actually spend in life, right? That is arbitrage, and that equals wealth. If I have expenses of $5,000 and I get back $6,000, technically I'm wealthy.
Right.
Right.
So you're making
because that asset that I put. So now I'm gonna bring that back to you. You have this business. I know, you do some more hand-to-hand stuff, but the leverage is that film, right? The leverage is once I make this film, it turns into this. But it's also, who did I bring in to make this film? What was the leverage that I used for them? And I think this is the lesson that you're really asking me about, is to your audience who are interested, how can they take what they're doing, maybe not as high, maybe not 15 years, maybe 5 years, but all the leverage that they built, all the goodwill, how can they take that to move off of this unstable environment and bet it, I wouldn't say all on Black, but close enough. How do they take that leverage and do what you did?
Yeah, right. I think it requires kind of recognizing what that leverage is, right? Like the contacts that are valuable, the experience that's valuable to somebody else that either they want to learn from that experience or they need those kinds of skills and services in some way. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think also the truth is like, because I had gotten to a certain point in my career, I should say, as an executive producer, I had some cushion under me to take a risk. So I was then in a position that I could say, all right, even if I didn't work for some time while I'm building this business, and in fact, it was forced because the industry was changing, and the gig that I was on Makers, the Makers conference for Yahoo, and the department really just went away. And so the job that I had with them went away. And so I said, okay, well, I may not work anyway. How can I take what I have and leverage it to build something that's going to bring in revenue, that's going to get me that arbitrage, basically.
Yep, that's great. So for those who maybe they don't have such a cushion, I believe maybe you can tell us about your business and that you're helping people find more cushion by getting funding for their projects to hopefully hit that home run. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is really this. It's like, how do I help filmmakers to get outside of the mindset of this is the only way that I can do it, and it's a kind of a losing way, right? Which is that you don't make a lot of money making independent films. And so your only options are to do that and be broke, or do that and have a side job or something like that. But it always, when people come to me, they're usually stuck in some sort of limiting way of thinking.
Yeah.
And so what I'm always trying to do with them is to expand their mind of how do you get out of that and look at what you have, look at what value you have to share, and maybe you can use that in a different way or set up your life in a different way. Maybe it's in acquisitions or something like that you have cash flow coming from one place, but freedom enough to do your artistic projects over here that allows that life to really be holistic and give you everything that you're needing, so that you're not stuck in this kind of like, either I have to give up what I love or I have to be broke.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's powerful. And I can tell you as an investor, we look at a lot of that as well. I want to know, well, where are you currently making money, or how much money do you have to be able to really put energy into what you're doing, right? I technically would rather you work part-time, and this is just a nod to some of the people who are thinking of doing this but can't leave their jobs per se. I'd rather you work and then do this part-time, and maybe it takes a little bit longer, but you have that stability, right, while you're doing it, then, I'm just going to quit with 1 month of runway and hope for the best, right? And I think that's what you did. You did the smart route. You had enough runway, but then you also developed skills, and maybe you should talk to that. These skills of raising money. Because I think that's the biggest thing. If I can raise money to get my film financed and my film is good enough, then I use my leverage.
Right, exactly.
Right? My relationships, right?
100%. And that's how we did it, right? That's what happened with my first film. And I think that it's hard to see that for a lot of people, especially who are working paycheck to paycheck in the industry, which is very time consuming. It's very like 12-hour days, 14-hour days, right? It can be the standard, especially in production, to see how to even find that little space.
You really, really change the game when you're able to understand all things around you and be able to extract, put it in the contained form, just like a film, and then take that and allow that to elevate. Once you can do that, sky's the limit. Your money making is unlimited. Your success, your wealth, your happiness is unlimited if you know how to do that. So
beautiful. Thank you so much for that. So let's maybe end on this, and you're kind of speaking about it already. And so I just want to really make this clear. if you're going to go the entrepreneurial route, or if you're simply going to think like an entrepreneur as a creative professional, as a filmmaker or somebody like that, what is like the number one thing that we need to have in our mindset about how do I need to think like an entrepreneur to be successful?
So you touched on it early, and I'll connect it. The word I use is grit, quite frankly. I just think it's a long-term mindset of eventually, if I do something long enough, I will win at it, right? You know, most people, they go through this loop, and it's essentially you get into something new. So yes, I've been in the industry of film, but now I'm going to make my own. So I am optimistically delusional, if you will, right? I am like, yes, I am ready to do this. But then you get to a next phase and you're essentially pessimistically informed. Now I know what this takes, and now the pessimism starts to kick in. So the grit comes if you can fight through that. And what happens is if you don't, you go through these continuous loops of starting something new, right? And falling out and starting something new. And you look up 5 years later and you've done nothing except start a few new things, right? Versus having the grit to keep going, right? Even at the hard parts, because that's all this is. It's just a long game.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have expectations in 3 months, but it is 3 years maybe, right? But it's the grit to fight through it. So to me, that is the number one mindset that someone should have. And the reason why I said this, because earlier you said, had I known
right,
this,
I wouldn't have done it.
I probably wouldn't have done it.
Right, exactly.
But what you disclosed was grit. That's what you displayed this whole time. It's like, you know what? I fought through this, and it took me 10 years to get through this.
100%.
10 years, y'all.
Yeah.
10 years. So that if that's not grit, I don't know. That had to be your number one mindset was, you know, and you had to have some down times, right? So how do you fight through them and keep going?
Yeah.
To me, your number one mindset is grit.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think that's such an important message, especially right now with what's going on in the industry. So we're going to wrap it up there. Tell us, how can people reach you, Brett? Who do you want to hear from? What do you want people to reach out to you about? Yeah,
I mean, so I'm in the acquisition space. Again, I'm looking to help people who are looking to acquire assets in an asset-rich environment that we're in right now. It's 2025. I'm going to date this, but literally we're in this flux. And so a person like you who's building assets, but also has other skills that maybe can incorporate more assets. I love to work with people like that who are looking to acquire assets. You can reach me. I'm on social media. I guess I'm on Instagram, Brett_EBITDA. That's expenses before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, right? Brett with 2 T's.
Amazing.
So Brett,
we'll put it in the
yeah,
notes.
and then you can go to my website at, I got 3 of them. Cashflowcatalystclub.com.
Cashflowcatalystclub.com.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Amazing. And we'll put all of that in the notes so people can check you out and reach out. I hope that there was something valuable here for you. If you want to chat with me more about this, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook, Joyce Mishaan, or Instagram, or go to my website, joycemishaan.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what challenges specifically you're having, and let's break through them, right? That's really what this is all about. Please keep an eye out for the next one, and absolutely check out Brett's socials, check out his website. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This was great.
A fantastic conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm so grateful.